The City Council Committee on Administration and Finance, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, is meeting in person today, Thursday, June 1st, 2023 at 6:15 p.m. for the purpose of discussing fiscal year 2024 departmental operating budgets and any associated capital improvement plan projects. This meeting is being held primarily in the City Council Chambers, 93 Washington Street, Salem, Massachusetts, second floor. Individuals may also access the meeting to watch via Zoom using webinar ID 883-7527-1242, password 300142. Notice of this meeting was posted on May 30th, 2023 at 1:16 p.m. Tonight we will be covering the operating budgets for our Veterans Department, our library, and our planning department, and I'll say its many subsidiaries for brevity. We were supposed to also be discussing our sustainability department tonight, but that has been postponed to next Monday, the 5th. So if you're here for sustainability, please join us next Monday, the 5th, for that conversation. And that said, I will do a better job noting tonight. We are joined by our mayor. We are joined by our finance director. Appreciate you guys hanging with us for the past 3 days in a row as we go through these marathon meetings. And we'll get started with our veterans agent, Kim Emmerling. Kim, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here at this annual event. So I look forward to any and all questions. Our budget is generally pretty straightforward. I think we've been level funded on everything except employee wages for the 12 years I've been here, but I've never had a problem either going over those or the councils throughout the last 12 years, and the mayor has been very helpful. So if I ever needed anything if we ever needed anything for the department as far as what we're going to do in the city, always able to find the funding, any additional funding that was required. It really hasn't been all that much over the years, but it's nice to know it's always there. So subject to your questions.
Will you just sort of pretend that we just met and kind of walk us through what exactly it is the Veterans Department does for the city?
Sure. So primarily, the state of Massachusetts is the only state that has a veteran service officer dedicated in each community throughout the state. So no other state in the U.S. has this, so it's a great benefit to our veterans, of course, and their widows and dependents. And in the state of Massachusetts, that's what puts the veterans officers in the chair to manage mostly state benefits that are out there, collectively known as Chapter 115, which are income-based, needs-based benefit for widows, veterans, and their dependents. And when the state says when the state says veteran, they really mean widows and dependents as well. So those benefits under Chapter 115, if they're eligible, and that's what my office does with all the paper, is just determine eligibility. Of course, they have to be an honorably serving veteran, and then everything from there on. And we verify everything that to make sure they're eligible for the benefit. And then it's a monthly benefit, could be just straight up ordinary benefit, which is cash to help them get by month to month, or it could be medical expense reimbursements, and that could open the door, even if they aren't able to get any benefit per se per month, and they're still eligible for Chapter 115. That could open the door for if they need help with rental assistance or moving expenses and all that stuff. So that's what we manage out of the office. And this year it goes up and down. When I first started, a lot of people came, a lot of veterans revisited the Veterans Office, and, our numbers spiked pretty high. And then, there are transitional benefits, so they come off eventually. They're either transition for, unfortunately, passing away, or they get a job, which we help them do, or they're in school and they're just out of school for the few months and need to be on benefits because they can't find anything, or we put them on benefits and then they're spending it for daycare. So we sort of keep them on benefits so they don't lose anything, and then they go back to school and they come off the benefit. So once we put people on veterans and widows on benefits, the goal is really to get them off benefits. So as soon as, in my conversation with them all is, these are benefits, this is what you're going to be eligible for, and the minute you sign that document, now my job is to get you off benefits because it's not a permanent thing. So so the numbers go up and down, and right now we're at about 34, 35 each month, and as you can see, we're just under about $370,000 that we'll pay for this year. And that's almost what we estimated last year. And we would have came in under, except for an anomaly that came our way, and we had to pay. So, but that's what we do basically. And then as we do the intakes for all of it, whoever comes in the office, whatever good idea comes in, I kind of listen to, and then see if we can manage it out of the office. Or, but the intake, that portion for the veteran or the widow, is usually what takes the longest, because there's so many benefits that are out there, not just Chapter 115, but federal VA benefits that we manage out of the office, VA claims, burials, education benefits. There's a plethora of them out there, and so that intake is what really takes the longest amount of time for us when somebody comes in. So, and then I try and figure out which path to take in order to get the best benefit available to them, for them. So.
Thank you for that. I forgot to note at the beginning of the meeting, we are joined by all members of the Finance Committee except for Councilor Watson-Felt, who is absent. From the Committee of the Whole, we're also joined by Councilor Varela, Councilor Prosnewski, Councilor Cohen, and Councilor Morcillo. Questions and comments from the committee? Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kim, for everything you do for our veterans. To start off, I just want to say this is the most straightforward budget that I think we look at. It's you asked for to the penny what you got last time, and you were granted all of that. So just appreciate all you do on this relatively light budget. I guess the first question is, do we track the size of our veteran population in Salem, and what does that look like over the years, if we do track that? If there is a way to track that, I guess.
So the general rule of thumb is 10% of the population is veterans and widows. And the last census, the census before the last, we sent out an inquiry. And again, it all has to be self-identifying. And it came in right about 10%. But I know there's more out there, but there's no real, because I have veterans that are in my office and they didn't fill that little report out when they sent the census in. So it's hit or miss, but generally it's around 10 or 11%.
Okay. So I think a lot of what I see from constituents, and I'm sure a lot of what you see is veterans who have the most need are seeking out the services. Do you have services that you offer around, I guess, like when I was serving, I found a lot of soldiers didn't have a lot of knowledge around how to translate what they did in the military to what they could do in the civilian life. Are there resources that you point veterans to show how those things could translate, how you would write a resume, how you would put that in there? Is that a different group that would deal with that?
Well, it is a different group, but when they come through my office, I network with all of the available resources that are out there, and Mass Hire is one of them. They do resume writing, and there are definitions about or matrices out there on how to match up what their military MOS or job was to the civilian workforce. So Mass Hire does that. There's a couple other granted functions that do that as well. They have classes all the time, and I get the flyers. I try and blast them out as widely as possible, and that's generally what the office, what I've sort of built it into, is just a huge networking operation. So if somebody comes in, I'm a jack of all trades, master at none. So I just pass it off and make sure that somebody else takes care of that. And as well as I do, it's all about the follow-up to make sure that it happens. So whenever I pass them off to somebody, I'll call them up a couple weeks later, make sure it actually happened. So.
Do you ever connect them with military job placement? Like there's private companies that will specifically seek out veterans to place them into jobs for companies looking to hire veterans. Is that something that you do as well?
So those notifications do come my way, but I lean on Mass Hire. They have a veterans rep right down the street here, right across the street, and their job is to work solely with veterans. So when I first started, that position wasn't filled. Excuse me. It took about 2 years. So I was doing that all at the beginning, and then when they came in there, that's their job. So I network with them, and they're in transition right now, but we're still trying to keep the same thing going. So,
thanks.
Councillor Stott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all that you do as well for our community. I just had a really quick question about a line that was in your narrative to help finalize the new Massachusetts National Guard Museum. Could you share what you can share about that?
absolutely. So the Mass National Guard has this vision of putting their Massachusetts museum here in Salem. And to that end, there are very preliminary discussions with the visitor center and the Guard, and we're kind of resurrecting it again because the state actually funded some seed money to get that action moved. So we're going to be meeting in the next few weeks to try and figure out if that's even possible. And that's a government office, so there happens to be somebody from the GAO office that lives here in Salem and knows how to do all those kind of fundamental transfers of government property. So the goal is, from the Guard perspective, is to get the Mass National Guard Museum here in the visitor center. There is a small display right now. If you've been through there, you can see it. There's we set that up last December, or they set that up. Probably I don't have anything to do with it, but that exhibit should be, hopefully turned into a museum for the Massachusetts Guard, and then further on down the road, the General Keefe, who's in charge of the Mass National Guard, he's been working the back streets of National Guard Bureau to try and get the National Guard Museum flagged here down the road. So first step is to get the Mass Guard Museum planted, and the minute that happens or it's signed off, he's going to start pushing the Guard Bureau to get the the National Guard Bureau Museum placed here, and that would be all 52 states and what's the word? Right, territories. Thank you. To send their museum items here. So that's the vision, the Guard vision of the visitor center right now. So, and that'd be pretty nice.
Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair McLean, not being a member of the committee. It's kind of cool that of 435 communities in Massachusetts, we have the best VSO. And I just want to give an example. So when the illegal rooming house on Hancock Street burnt down, the only way that the residents could get some of the monies that were raised by the city and privately was for them to be able to prove their residency, and the property owner wasn't as forthcoming with some of them as could have been. And one resident told me that there was a resident there who was a veteran, and when I spoke to that person, they couldn't remember that they were a veteran. And I called Kim up, and I called you up, and you took action, and not only were you able to reconnect with them, but the city was able to get them some money. So I really want to show gratitude for the way that you took the initiative on that.
Well, thank you. And to your first point, of course, I concur with that being. But to your second point, the office, we try to, as I said, network everything together. But I try to get to as many monthly community impact team mental health and homelessness meetings. They do it every month. And if you're ever bored, you should go to that. But it's eye-opening, and there's a lot of veterans. There's a lot of homeless and people that just kind of wander through Salem because they get the calling. And sometimes they're veterans, sometimes they're not. So we work very closely with them and LifeBridge. And like you said, there's some of them that think they're a veteran or thought they were. And I tell everybody, don't try and figure it out. Just give me a call and I'll figure out, because there's 6 different ways of Sunday to try and do that. And some of them, it's like winning the lottery because they were told they didn't have a good discharge, and it turns out they really did, but they didn't know that. And you know as well as I do that people get this discharge for various reasons, and they might have gotten in trouble, but they still got an honorable or at least a general, which still opens the door for a lot of benefits. But they thought they were, totally got a dishonorable because that's what their sergeant told them on the way out the door. So.
Councilor Morcillo.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for all the work that you do, and thank you for explaining what your office does. That's very important. Can you just talk a little bit about the driver and what the driver services are for?
I was definitely going to get to that. So in the office, the city of Salem, for 20 plus years now, has had a car dedicated and a part-time driver dedicated just to veteran services. It's not to drive Kim Emmerling around like an admiral, but it's to just bring veterans to and from their medical appointments. I haven't tried that yet, but maybe I will have them drive me. I get in the back seat and drive around. So we are the only community that has that kind of operation. Others have one dedicated to the office, but it's not with a part-time driver. It's for the VSO to run around. And I use the car if my own vehicle, if the car is not being used, I'll use it to run around the city and do whatever has to be done. But we're the only one that actually has it on the books. And others use volunteers. They get cars donated. But the commitment from Salem has always been, to have that capability. And it is only part-time, but sometimes, he's that driver's out there almost every day some days. So it's a great benefit. I will just say one other thing that Anna's pinching me to make sure I remember, I can't believe I forgot, was so in the budget, that money, that $370,000 for the year, that I always let everybody know that's a city and a state benefit, because the city has to fund it because that's the law, but the state actually reimburses the city 75 cents on the dollar. So if I'm doing everything I'm supposed to, we'll get 75 cents on the dollar back. So I make sure everyone knows it's not just the state doing this. They're telling us to do it, but the city has to pony up at least 25% of it and everything up front. And then next year it'll get 75% back. So I think I've been even all the way around for 12 years running. We'll watch the next year not be. So.
Councilor Prosnowski.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Yeah. We're very fortunate, we're very fortunate, Kim, to have the cream of the crop as far as veteran services in this state through you, through what you do. I see firsthand. So many good stories come out of it. You sort of answered the question when Councilor Cohen was asking about on the Hancock Street thing. But I think what people would like to know is that you work hand in hand with LifeBridge when it comes to the homelessness, and when somebody from LifeBridge tells a veterans agent that they have a homeless person in town that is a veteran or could be a veteran, Kim steps right in and wraps his arms around that person and takes them away to heaven, I guess. It's someplace pretty good. So could you, but the nice thing is LifeBridge has some difficulties getting people off the street and placing them. Kim somehow manages to work some kind of miracle, and when somebody's given to them, he finds them places to go. Could you explain how that works from your end? Because I know that
Sure.
that the state helps out.
I would love to. But to your first point, I'm the only fish in the VSO pond in Salem here, and I'm doing my job. So I appreciate the sentiments. I think I just try and, as working in the community, if they're a Salem veteran, then I just, like you said, I try and wrap my arms around it and get whatever benefits are available to them. There are other quality VSOs across the state. I don't know where they are, but they're out there, I'm sure. But when it comes to homelessness, the VA has a whole program dedicated to eliminating veteran homelessness. So, but if these people that come through LifeBridge don't know that, that they're even a veteran, that's the first step. I find their DD-214, and once I do that, then we can get them into the VA healthcare system, start a VA claim if they're even possibly eligible for that, and of course get them into the homelessness that's called VASH. It's essentially a Section 8 voucher for veterans, and it moves really quickly. Depending on their staffing, the priority is always to get somebody out from under a bridge, right? That's homeless. But if they've got, and then all others. But case in point, just recently, this gentleman was at LifeBridge since January, and I didn't even know it until mentioned it. I went to the homeless meeting. I'm like, well, okay, time out here. I mean, I tell them all the time, if you hear veteran, call me. Don't wait till the meeting. But anyway, actually got that kid a voucher in like 16 days. And it wasn't me. I mean, I tell them who to call, and then I call and make sure that they're following up, and that's all I do. But in like 16 days, he had a voucher, and then we got him housed over in Beverly. And sometimes we do it in Salem, and sometimes landlords will, I know several of the landlords now, so if they happen to have a place, they'll call me sometimes and say, do you have, try and match up a square peg and a, square hole, so. But it's really all about networking and making sure I know what the other various programs are. And then if they, do that intake and again, it matches up, that's all I try and do. So, and sometimes we get lucky. So.
Thank you. And just one more subject. When Councilor Stodd brought up about the museum, and you were talking about the National Guard Museum, where the visitor centers now is where the Massachusetts National Guard Armory used to be. And I know that
exactly
when it burned down in 1980 in the basement where the offices was, they had their own, it was like a museum collection that they had of not only materials, but they had priceless paintings that were done by famous painters that were hanging on the walls. Do you know if anything was ever salvaged and left and brought somewhere else out of that fire, or that was at a total loss?
So it wasn't a total loss, and actually at this last muster, there was a group of Second Corps cadets this is the first time I heard stories about they were in there chucking stuff out of the window, to save it. So a lot of those things, some disappeared, of course, but a majority of it, I believe, went to the PEM, and the PEM has ownership of it at this moment. So when the museum kicks off, or it really gets into serious talks, we're going to have to bring them in, find out exactly what's what, and try and get it back into the museum, of course. So.
Thank you.
That's the perfect place for it. The armory used to be there, and so we just got to make it. The guards got to have it, make it happen. My job, like with the muster, I don't call in the F-16s. That's the general. He's doing all that stuff. I just grease the skids and make sure the city's aware of what's going on. So,
thank you.
Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, Chair McLean. And yes, of course, as everyone said, thank you for the work that you do. So important. I was just quickly curious about where it says redo for the Salem Common War Memorial. That sounds interesting. What was the idea for that?
Well, the idea is it certainly needs to be redone, because there's some names that aren't on there and that should be on there, and there's some on there that maybe shouldn't be on there. And we're sort of in the process of going through all that. And with the 400th anniversary coming up, that is sort of what's kind of pushing it. So the intent is, and the hope is, that by the 400th, we'll have a new war monument down there, war memorial down there for those on there. So that's the idea. But I am, I have a great staff, as you know. It's enormous. So everything gets prioritized. So. Elizabeth Covina, of course, she's my full-time assistant, and she's just come into she's been there about 7 years, and just does wonderful things for us, and takes care of a lot of things when I'm not there, or at least takes good notes, and I can fix it when I get back. And it's really a great team. And Jean Guy Martineau is the driver, of course, and city has a really good thing going right now. So we're going to try and run that out as long as we can. So.
Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair McLean, being a member of the committee. I just don't want to be the only councilor not to say anything. Thank you for what you do, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. I intend to. So.
If there is nothing further, I'll add my thanks to the pile and I'll accept a motion. Councilor Hopworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to recommend a positive approval of the personnel budget of $142,923, the expenditures budget of $410,800, and the department total of $553,723.
Councilor Hapworth makes a motion to recommend approval of the Veterans Personnel Budget in the amount of $142,923, the expenditures budget in the amount of $410,800, for a total of $553,723. All those in favor? 3 hands plus my own. That carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed being a member of the community here and helping, and anything I can do for any of the council members, of course, please give me a call. You all have my cell. Don't send, try not to send me an email. I'd rather deal with it on a phone. So thanks very much. Appreciate it. Or in person, of course. Always come down to the office and see what's going on. Usually it's pretty busy. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, and we will move on to discussion of our library. Really excited for this one. Possibly the city service I use the most.
Well, thank you very much.
Big readers in our household. We're joined by our library director, and I will give you the floor likewise to explain just sort of what goes on in your day-to-day.
Oh, sure, so I can...
Lean right into that microphone,
Sorry,
please.
a little closer.
Like really close,
Really
don't
close,
be afraid.
okay. Okay, so at the library, we do a lot of different things. One of the most important things is we're open 7 days a week. That's fairly rare for libraries, especially during the summer, so that we're open and accessible for everybody. We curate collections of diverse items for all tastes. We run programs for all ages, book clubs. We provide internet access for folks in terms of Wi-Fi. We also have public computers. We offer technical assistance. We help connect people with resources. And I think most importantly, we're just a space. You can come to the library and just be, which sometimes is a hard thing to find. So that's mostly what we do. And I can talk a little bit about the proposed budget, if that's okay.
Yeah, please do. Okay. That is why we're here.
So I'm particularly excited and nervous this year because there's an initiative built into this budget, which is to eliminate overdue library fines. We're one of the last libraries that charges overdue fines. And we do this because that money is directly supporting our operational budget. So if we can find an alternate way to fund those things, we can eliminate fines, which I think would result in many happy patrons and also would reduce any barriers to borrowing and increase our usage. So the specific items which I added to this year's budget that were not previously included was under the books and materials section. I added the museum passes. So those are currently funded by fines. And we spend $4,700 a year for discounted passes to the New England Aquarium, Museum of Science, Isabella Stewart. There's all sorts of North Shore Children's Museum, so that families can get really good discounts. And we also added program supplies, which are also currently funded from fines, so that those are all the crafts and special things that we need for our librarians to run our excellent programs for all ages. And under the section for dues and subscriptions, I added one of our most important services that we offer is copying and printing. And if you don't know, we only charge 10 cents for copies and prints, which is a wonderful deal. And it's unfortunately doesn't cover the expense, but it is an important service for the folks that have difficulty paying for things. So we lease 2 state-of-the-art copiers, and we also have printers on each floor. So I did add what we spend each year from fines into the budget, and also our Zoom subscription, which we use for our programs and other book clubs and things like that.
Wonderful, thank you. I really appreciate you highlighting the fact that the library is in fact one of the few spaces that remains accessible to everybody and anybody, and you don't have to walk in with money in your pocket to do so. And that's an increasingly rare thing in our society, not just in our city. The accessibility it provides to people for information, the low-cost copying, the internet access, really, really important, something I hugely value about the library, so I'm glad you mentioned it. Comments and questions? Councilor Morcillo.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for getting rid of the fines. Was that a full replacement, what was put into the budget for the items that used to be covered by the fines?
Yes.
It was a full replacement?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
We have reduced our expenditures since before the pandemic, so yeah, that's what we currently spend.
I will say that it was nice to see the data that was provided, that, you know, things are ramping up again in the library, which is always good to see. Like, that is such a positive. So I wanted to point that out. And you should have talked about the stuffed animal sleepover. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that the library does. And I love to look at the pictures on social media. You have off-site outreach programs. Besides the farmers markets that you called out in the text and Old Town Hall, what else do you do for outreach?
So we're doing a bunch of kind of one-off things at the moment, like we're going to the Salem Arts Festival this weekend, and we'll just kind of pop up anywhere we're invited that we can schedule staffing-wise. So we're always looking for opportunities. And we'll be going to Pride on the Common on the 24th. I know we have lots of other things coming up, but they're usually fairly short because it is fairly intensive to bring staff and materials offsite and set up computers, and so, but we love to do it. So
at these pop-up events, do you bring books with you? Like, what is it that you're doing there?
Oh, absolutely. We're kind of like a full tiny branch, so we can register for cards. We'll bring materials to check out, lots of information, but mostly just kind of the talking to people, and most people kind of have no idea the breadth of things that we offer. So it's always fun. They'll say like, oh, you loan metal detectors? And we're like, yes, we have two. If you need one, come on by.
Yeah. You should get connected with some of the block parties that are happening around the city, or contacting some of the larger buildings like Pequot, like we talked about. Sometimes they have resident events in the summer. That could be another opportunity to do some outreach. Just a thought. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Stott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you. The library is my favorite place in the city. My daughter's as well. We literally threw a party the day it reopened in 2020. I just had a really quick question on the capital improvement items or program, if we can talk about that as well. There was a request for an outdoor ADA accessible book drop that doesn't look like it looks like it's noted as a future need. I was trying to rack my brain, and I think I recalled hearing about it on the historical. Okay, why is that not? I mean, I think that is a pretty current need to have an accessible ADA ramp. So why is that not included? Was there any background there?
So it actually, we have leftover ADA money. We usually get kind of a bunch, and we try to spend it as efficiently as possible. So we had to go through the Historic Commission because it's an outdoor fixture that's visible from the street. So it took a few meetings, but we gained approval. So we are planning to use our capital money from FY22 to have it installed. It does unfortunately have to go out to bid, which I hadn't anticipated that because it does require moving a little bit of the curb inside the fence and digging down and putting in a new platform and then cutting out a bit of the fence. But it should be installed this summer.
Okay, that's great.
Knock on wood.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I don't see anybody else with their hand raised. But while we're on the subject of the capital lines, I did notice that there was a request for some furniture upgrades. I'm just curious if that's a replacement, if there is additional furniture being added. I love a comfortable chair in a library.
That's what we're hoping for. That's one of our most frequent complaints, second to overdue fines, is our chairs. So it is, we are hoping to replace the chairs with kind of a vinyl padded seating that's easy to clean and maintain. And that's what we're hoping. We're also, if we want to add more kind of access to power, especially on the reference floor. Most of our outlets are around the perimeter of the room, so folks are kind of scrambling to the corners, and there's all this unused space. So we have some tables that we'd like to get that have outlets built in, so we can have more access to power kind of out into the floor and maximize the use of the space.
I love it. Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think regarding the seats, I think I know exactly who's making those comments, if I could guess. But I guess just a question out of curiosity. I think I had asked you a couple years ago. The Frank Weston Benson portrait that you guys have in there, is that something you're planning on keeping now? Or I know at one point you were looking to sort of see what the interest was out there because it could fund a lot of library projects. I assume it's probably would be a very expensive sale. Is that something you've sort of tabled and you're looking to just hang on to that?
Yes, so that belongs to the Board of Library Trustees, and they did try to sell it to pay for the fountain renovation, but unfortunately something went wrong in the bid process, and it didn't go through. So they did table that, but they have, in the meantime, fundraised and we wrote grants. We have CPA funds, so the fountain is actually under repair right now and should be functional this fall. I'm knock on wood again.
Great, thank you.
Okay, that looks like everybody. Councilor Hapworth.
I'd like to recommend approval of the personnel budget in the amount of $1,214,047. The expenditures budget in the amount of $392,704 for a grand total of $1,606,751.
Councilor Hapworth makes a motion to recommend approval of the library personnel budget in the amount of $1,214,047 and the expenditures in the amount of $392,704 for a total of $1,606,751. All those in favor? 3 plus my own. That carries. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, you're right. I'll put you in as the second. How about that? Moving on to planning. We will spend some time here.
Good evening. Ooh. It's a little louder than I was expecting. So
I think the order in our section is a little different than the order on our agenda. Would you like to start with the general administrative budget? Or?
yeah, if I could just talk broadly. Sure. Sure, and just recap what the planning department does. So we, we support boards and commissions. There's 12 boards and commissions that we support. Some of those are for one of the things we do, which is permitting. So the land use boards that are reviewing development projects that need some sort of review and or relief. We do long-range planning, and that could be a citywide effort like the open space and rec plan, or a smaller area like the municipal harbor plan. We develop policy work, working with many of you on that. So things like our housing work that we've been involved with for several years, or currently working on flood hazard overlay update and climate resiliency overlay district. We manage programs like the first-time home buyer or housing rehab program. and we also manage projects. And some of those things might be things like the offshore wind project. It might be managing a capital project like our park improvement at Palmer Cove. And most all of these things for the staff are involved not just with the project, but also in securing the funding for it. So oftentimes there's applying for grants, managing those grants, and then, cobbling together resources from many different areas to be able to move forward. So I want to just give a shout out to the team in the planning department. I'm really grateful for the folks that I get to work with every day. They're really care a lot about what they do. They care about the community and are passionate about it. So it's a privilege to work with them all. So that's kind of a quick overview of what we do. I think, while we have a Conservation Commission budget and HISCOM and Planning Board and Market and Tourism, just speaking broadly, the budget, there aren't any big changes. I think the things that you see that are changes are fees for DEP. So there are some parks that have environmental issues on them that we're still working with the state, or we're working to resolve those. And so there's an annual fee. We've always had these in our budget. The state has been varied in terms of actually sending us an invoice, and they've been a lot better about it this past year. And so there's a couple things that we need to increase there just to have the money on hand to pay those fees. As projects advance, those things go away when the project is complete and closed out. The other thing that you'll see in our budget is, so Jane Guy retired. She's still working part-time, but that FTE has been, like, her responsibilities, her duties are with other staff, but that FTE, we're looking to bring it back. But we're able to do it because several of our staff are funded through CDBG and not through the city. We're able to bring that position back with not it's not a full salary increase on the city account. So we're glad to have those personnel resources in the budget too. And so that's it in a nutshell. One other thing, we do have some changes in some of our subscriptions that, we dropped one subscription membership that we have, and are including some other things like I have the Boston Globe for the department, and I realized I'm paying for this personally, and probably that's not the best thing. So that's a small thing in there but it's covered by dropping some other things that we have come off. So I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, great. We're all doing a lot of page flipping as we're trying to make our way through the section, so I think what I might propose is that we all just go to the beginning of the section. Let's just walk through it as it's laid out, so that we're not all flipping back and forth the entire time.
Okay.
In our booklet, that starts with the Conservation Commission. Give everybody a second to get oriented. If anybody would like to direct any questions to this portion of the planning responsibilities, we can start here, and we'll get to the subjects as we arrive in them in the book, if that's okay. So does anybody have anything specific to conservation? Councilor Morcillo.
Thank you, Chair. Kate's amazing. And she's part-time conservation agent.
Right. So Kate Kennedy she's a full-time staff person. She's a conservation agent and planner. So she's juggling her responsibilities as a conservation agent with working on projects. Like she's last year worked on as part of the El Punto team for Resilient Together El Punto, and then this year as well with the next phase of that work.
Do you ever see that role expanding to a full-time conservation agent?
That's not something that we've contemplated. I think that there's, some of the, obviously, super well the policy work that we've been doing in that area last year in this area. I think one of the challenges with the role is with some of the things that aren't before the commission but are other opportunities or needs, like, there's conservation land that we know where it is, but how's it really being utilized and tracked? And I think that's an area where if we had some additional bandwidth, could focus on. Mm-hmm. That's something that, we work towards, but it's, with particularly staff who are working with permitting boards, there's, that has to happen, deadlines and things. And so that means other things get squeezed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what we lack here is some proactive enforcement of conservation issues. And it's kind of left up to neighbors or other residents to uncover and report. And then I know, it just takes a while, which, it's a problem with conservation land itself, which should be enforced to the fullest extent. And so there's a lot of issues that I could see that growing to a full-time position. There's just a lot on her plate. And she does it great. She always picks up the phone, and if I give her an address, she goes out there. But I know it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that comment.
Okay. Seeing nothing further on the Conservation Commission, I will take a motion for this portion of the planning budget. Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to recommend approval for the personnel budget in the amount of $30,266, the expenditures budget in the amount of $1,413, and the department total of $31,679.
Councilor Hapworth makes a motion to recommend approval of the Conservation Commission personnel budget in the amount of $30,266, the expenditures in the amount of $1,413 for a total of $31,679, seconded by Councilor Stott. All those in favor? 3 plus my own, that carries. Moving forward to the Planning Board.
I'd also could I just also give a shout out to the folks that serve on our boards and commissions, because they devote a lot of time and do really good work, and not all communities can say that. We've got really dedicated volunteers that do really high quality work on our boards and commissions, so I'm super appreciative of what they do too.
Absolutely, I would second that wholeheartedly. That for many people is where their interaction with a lot of the plans and rules of our city really happens. So it's a critical piece, and we're very grateful for those volunteers and how seriously many of them take it. I mean, it's a lot of work, and they really do good work. Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Not being a member of the committee, I want to echo, I'm liaison to the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board from the council, and I want to echo Councilor Marcillo's comments about Kate. She's the most responsive person and really helpful when we have a meeting that conflicts, and she will actually give me a recap, as I'm sure she does other people. And I also wanted to say that I think it's going to be a loss that we're losing Elena, who has been terrific, and it's not easy to manage the planning board sometimes because they have such jurisdiction, and I also want to echo your comments. Before I was a counselor, I served, as you know, for a total of 17 years as a board committee person, and always appreciate the volunteer work that people do and their commitment to the city. I do want to say something, so this is for you and the mayor. I'm not speaking to any particular person on the planning board. I think there's a good range of knowledge, but it's not very diverse. there's no one of color on the planning board, and this is in my estimation, the board that affects the most change from housing and development, and they have maybe more flexibility than most boards other than the zoning board. So just something to think about when there's future openings. I think, I know that some of my colleagues, when other department heads have been here, have been really assertive at talking about our need to make departments and boards more diverse if possible.
Yeah, thank you. It is something that, when vacancies come up, we're very mindful. I mean, there's a skill set, but we're also looking at, the demographic of the board and seeing where we can, diversify, including, having renters, people from different neighborhoods of the city, we haven't updated this in a couple years, but the geographic distribution of board members was not as widespread as I think would be most beneficial. So thank you for that comment.
Can I respond as well? Is this one on? Can you hear me? Entirely agree, and I think that one of the topics I had a long conversation with the members of the LLC and some others about is how we go about our filling board vacancies, which in the past has been very reactive. Put out a notice and wait for people to respond, or reach out to very specific individuals that are part of, I think, already part of the engaged population of our community. So really trying to grow, not just in terms of racial diversity, but also lived experience, geographic diversity, and background, the diversity of people on there's hundreds of boards and commission seats, and I think it's been a few years since we've done a demographic survey of the membership, and I that's something that I'd like us to undertake probably in the next couple of months, assess where we are, and then identify how we can work with our community partners to find opportunities to bring in new voices and new perspectives to some of these committees and boards.
Can I follow? Yeah, if I could follow up, Mayor. Just an example, and I knew you were involved in this decision. There was a vacancy, actually Councilor Stott was the liaison to CERC, the Sustainability, Energy, and Resiliency Committee, and there were some great candidates, including some that from an experience in the industry standpoint, they were, maybe in that perspective more qualified. But the person that was chosen to fill that role came from a kind of a marginalized community, had a lot of interest, and as we're, as an example, as an environmental justice community, we didn't have on a committee that was overseeing some sustainability and resiliency really any representation. So I wanted to say that was like an example of what we can do.
Anybody further on the planning board? Doesn't look like it. I will accept a motion. Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve the personnel budget in the amount of $33,733, the expenditures budget in the amount of $3,730 for a grand total of $37,463.
Councilor Hapworth makes a motion to approve the planning board personnel budget of $33,733, expenditures in the amount of $3,730 for a total of $37,463, seconded by Councilor Stott. All those in favor? There's 3 plus my own. That carries. Now we move into general administration. Trying to get to our detail sheet without overshooting. Okay, so I'm at 673. Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair McLean, not being a member of the committee. I have a few questions and comments. And I'm going to preface it by saying I do want to also acknowledge that although it's going to a good place, I think we'll all agree that losing Seth Luttrell was a loss. He's a unique person with a lot of knowledge and initiative. And I also want to say that no matter where we've started, hopefully you feel the same, that we end up in a decent place. I want to start with Shetland Park. Councillor McCarthy at the time, Councillor Hapworth, and I met with you and the solicitor when we were potentially dealing with a motion in front of the council. And you had offered that through a contract with Sasaki that there would be, you know, something presented to the city as they got through their study. And I just want to see if you had any kind of, I know there's some information here that it would, you know, general, but any idea of when the timeline would be, when there would be like a public presentation of what they, and in coordination with you, will be presented to the city.
Excuse me. Yeah. So we ran the process last year with Sasaki. It took longer than had been expected because Prime Group, the owner, took them longer to provide the data that we needed to do the analysis. So the report, excuse me, the last public meeting was in December. The report has been compiled, which is, you know, a compilation of the materials that have been presented at the public workshops, which included, you know, the various scenarios, commitments the developer had made, and then some vision statements that the community had put input on. And so that we have, I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but I'm just being direct. Like, we have been waiting, we waited a long time for Prime to provide comments to us. And that time has elapsed. We have, yesterday was their final deadline, so we are drafting the closing statement for that, and then it will be sent out for translation and published. So that report is a compilation of the process. And in terms of what the Prime Group is doing next, they did not provide a timeline for when they are moving forward. That's what we were looking for them to provide as part of this conclusion, to provide this as sort of an onboard or on-ramp for them as they continue their work in the community.
As we've talked about, I'm a little skeptical because what they presented to the Point Neighborhood and to the CERC committee is very different from what, you know, evolved. And so maybe perhaps you'll consider when the time is right to maybe come to the council and maybe present what some of the findings are, committee of the whole or something. My next thing is ADUs, you know, for a lot of different reasons outside of either our control or the city's control, we haven't been able to advance some of the housing initiatives that are in the roadmap. You know, MBTA communities has affected the process with inclusionary zoning, for example, and that's really been tough to navigate because some of their rules don't necessarily jive with the goals of the city roadmap. And obviously, we're waiting for home rule petition approval on the condo conversion ordinance. ADUs, which has been through several gyrations through the council, I just want to make a comment on that. I think we'd all agree that it's a really good tool, and I've been working with Amanda and some of the other staff. For multifamilies, it's a more tedious process. There's more requirements, and one of the things that Amanda is trying to work on, because if you go through the application process, it's one of those applications where if you don't fulfill one page, you can't see the page in front of you. So you don't really have an idea of how many things you have to do to have the, the fire marshal, the building inspector sign off on it. And so at your convenience, maybe you and Amanda could talk. Amanda had this idea that she could come up with maybe a one sheet that would list the different things that a property owner would have to do.
Yes, yep, I'm familiar with that, yeah.
Going to the condo conversion, this has been frustrating. You know, 3 of the councilors serve on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board. We passed the home rule petition February of last year. We had to refile it this year. And I know you probably don't have an answer. And, you know, I've been trying to work with Senator Lovely and Representative Cruz. But I hope you're feeling the same frustration that we are, that we can't deliberate on the process until we get approval from the legislature. And Somerville has already gone through their process, so I'm hoping, I don't know if you know anything, but I'm assuming you don't know more than we do?
I don't, yeah.
Okay. But if you find out something, you'll let us know.
Oh, of
right?
course, yes.
In the details on the green building ordinance, I just want to update things a little bit. I very much want to appreciate the work that Elena and especially Cassie have worked with me on, and just letting you know this, the general content of it. We'll still need language on bicycle parking and EV charging, but. Very grateful that Neil Duffy is with us because understands, you know, how all the processes work, obviously has a lot of knowledge about DOER. And it's possible, we have a motion in front of the council to consider passing what they call the specialized stretch code, which is in addition to the stretch code that we adopt. We opted in and then it was forced on all green communities. And that may make a lot of the language mute. So I'm just letting you know that. If you could let Cassie know.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm going to bring up the same comment I had on the planning board. I do feel like, and I know this is something you and I have talked about, it would be great if the planners were a little more diverse in some ways. I'm not speaking to any particular planner because I've had a good relationship with all of them, but just something to throw in your pocket. And I just have a few more things. Palmer Cove Park, you mentioned, phase 2. There's like 12 initiatives and 11 of them are great, from how it affects the people who live at Pioneer Terrace and even a lot of the people who live in the neighborhood. I do want to bring up something that's been kind of contentious, and that is there's one component, which is the conversion of a baseball field to a kind of multi-use field. And this really is in some ways a cultural issue for many people in the neighborhood. I'm just expressing that I'm not really satisfied with the way the process has played out, and I'm expressing, you know, you can address this if you want, that some of the people in the neighborhood don't feel like the neighborhood can affect the process. I don't know if you want to speak to that, but if not, I feel like people feel that sometimes in that neighborhood that decisions are, in the Point neighborhood, that decisions are made, and even if there's a meeting, it may not have a, you know, corresponding result that might be satisfactory.
Yeah, I guess you know, on the process, which goes back several years when that was initiated, you know, there was a working group of folks of various representing different interests that were kind of the team, seeing the process through, as well as community input through that, and the question about softball field or baseball field remaining or not. You know, there were very clear views on lots of things, and that was one where it was kind of split based on, you know, the process that there was input on. I think, you know, in the Park and Rec Commission, in their process, where, you know, they are the body that makes the decision about what the program looks like. You know, I think in their review of what the park system's needs were and the facilities in various parks, sort of the operational costs, you know, that sort of the sustainability of the asset once it's improved, and sort of their analysis of the totality, understanding that there was not consensus one way or the other, that was the choice that they made. In terms of the process management of that, I mean, the project manager, communicated out to everybody that had been part of it, and that's been consistent. And Tom Devine has done many of these projects, and he cares very deeply about the process and the engagement. So I understand that there are folks that aren't happy with the decision that the Park and Rec Commission made.
Thank you. I just two more things. One is resiliency versus sustainability, and I do want to commend Council Marcillo for her work on resiliency projects. I know you've been involved in a lot of the working groups, the wetlands ordinance, and the hopefully future flood resiliency ordinance, and I'm looking forward to having meetings about that and make sure it's not limited and that it's as expansive as possible as the vulnerability to the communities, especially places like the Point expand with the climate crisis. My concern is that we don't do enough. In your detail, you mentioned that it's a priority to address the climate change, which I would call crisis or emergency, and just, not expecting answers now, but I don't feel like we've had enough focus on the sustainability aspect. I look at it like, we have water that's rising, according to the IPCC, just came out last year, at a much faster rate. The temperature is getting warmer at a much faster rate than anticipated even 5 years ago. And so we can create all sorts of adaptation and mitigation, resiliency projects, but it's just a matter of time before the climate, overcomes any money that we spend to protect our land and the ability for people not to be dislocated from their homes, okay? So, if you want to say something, fine, but I just would like to encourage more of addressing the climate in the sense that our built economy is about almost 50% of greenhouse gas emissions, and transportation is probably another 42%, at least according to Resilient Together. And I'm just giving you my opinion. We're not doing enough planning in that part because that's where things are accelerating at a much faster rate than even the resiliency issues.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I think, we work, the sustainability department, we work very closely with them. And I think as Neil is getting his legs under him and staffed up as well, it's looking at just what you're saying. How do we amp things up, and what does that look like?
So one more, and I would like you to respond to this, is Canal Street Station, or for people, Bertini project.
Yeah.
Not just because it's in my ward and touches Ward 7 and 3 as well, but I believe it's potentially the most transformative project that we are considering to date. It is affecting resiliency because, most, if not all of Rosie's Pond is in their purchase. It's sustainable. It's going to be an all-electric. We've had community meetings. It's workforce housing, where our rental stock is diminishing, to add 250 rental units that are walking distance from the hospital, Amazon, and Salem State, and potentially just a rock's throw from the new train stop, is really exceptional. It's much easier for a CDC or a Beacon Communities to get funding, to do affordability, obviously, and to get vouchers and things like that. And this is a project that is committed to 20% at 60%. I know you've been in contact with them there was a potential to be involved with Harbor Light, where 16 of the 50 affordable units would be at 30% AMI, and some other things like that. So I'm expressing that I feel that this is a really important project. I know there's a lot of maybe additional costs that have come up with engineering review, because of the flood tanks and everything else. And even, I know there was some emails going back and forth from Elena to the development team about Bill Ross and some of the other expenditures for some further review. But I'm just speaking as one counselor, as 10% of the council, that I really want this to happen, and I'm asking you and your department to be a champion for this, knowing that there's, things that they have to go through to make it happen. But I would like to see it happen, and I'm hoping that you feel the same way.
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of positives that you listed that it's bringing in, and they're going through the process. And, I think, in terms of the Conservation Commission review, there's changes that they needed to make. And I think it's, as a result of the new ordinance, and I think it's showing how that ordinance is working and that they've been able to accommodate that. I think, from a design perspective, there were comments from the Planning Board and the Design Review Board, and they addressed those to have the canal frontage be more different materials that are a better fit. So I know the economics are tough, and we did have a meeting with them and with Harbor Light, and we suggested some other ideas for them that could still have Harbor Light participate, but we haven't heard back from them on that.
So let's make this happen. Okay.
Yeah, no,
Together?
it's going through the process. I don't see, we don't, our role is to make sure that everybody's getting the information that they need to get the analyses are getting done. We don't sort of steer
we had a
things
different role when I was a board member than we do now, and I'm a little more anxious. So I just want to express my views on that.
Okay.
I'm really a big supporter of this. I think it would be really great for Salem and where we need to get, especially on housing. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the budget. I know planning has a lot of responsibilities. Let's make sure that we're keeping everything grounded in the matter that's in front of us. We've all got Tom's phone number. Councilor Stott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have a lot going on in here, so I have a few questions. Sure. I'll start with kind of the data that was prepared. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like there was estimated fiscal year 23 numbers included in your data for the projects. Hopefully that's coming. That's
Unfortunately, excuse me, that's okay. Unfortunately, that's a technical issue that we caught too late. We were having a technical issue with some item saving, and I caught that once we had gone to print, so apologies. We can get that updated. It will be up on the web soon. And I think, I don't know, Tom, if you have.
Great, yeah, because some of those are really kind of interesting numbers, like the rental housing subsidies, the affordable housing units assisted, like that number jumped in 2022. So I'm really hoping we're staying on trend in 2023 and so forth, or why there was that jump. And if there's any, I just, data is always good. Along those lines, you have a lot going on, similar to my fellow counselors, especially ward counselors. You get a lot of questions. We get a lot of questions about where are the projects in the status, what's going on here, or I heard about this project, and some of them have been permitted 10 years ago, and then they're going back and getting extensions. So there's a lot going on, and I also appreciate Elena. She recently sent me an email with various updates of all the projects in Ward 6. But one item that was super helpful as a pandemic plus, I like to call it, is moving all of the planning documents onto SharePoint. So thank you for that, and thank you for that accessibility and transparency there. I will even say that as a council, we're modeling after the process that you have used. I met with Amanda, and she kind of went through with me how it was all modeled and organized. I would love to request that we take that a step further. So right now it's there. Like if you look in the agendas and you find the folders and you dig down to find find the specific projects. If we could somehow magically just make those links a little more accessible, they're really just links to projects by maybe naming them or something, just because I think the transparency of where these projects are, what the actual status is for items, so people can really provide good comments and good feedback and really know what they're talking about when they hear of a project, because usually it's just like the number of units or the number of parking, but to really get the bigger picture, you really need to see all of those documents.
Can I just make sure I'm understanding? So it's not new material, it's just presenting it on the website in a way that's more intuitive for people?
I think so. I mean, to me, it's all kind of like baby steps. I'm not saying like totally redesign your entire process to make it more transparent, but you already have all of these documents available in an electronic manner to just make them a little easier to access in relation to a project. Like I have to know what date a project was in front of the planning board to then dig in to find that folder. Maybe if there was a simple way to search for like a street name or something. I'm not quite sure what the answer is, but again, I'm not saying like reinvent any wheels or anything. I don't think there's even a cost associated to this, but I think it would also save your department a lot of time with answering questions from us and probably from the public to get information. But gone are the days where we have to go into the office and say, can you pull out the plan? So I do love that everything's accessible. I have a very specific budget question, and I may have missed this last year. This was under contracted services. There are parks listed with fees associated, like Furlong, Gagne, Mansfield. What are those for?
Right, so those are the excuse me, those are properties with environmental issues. And we have, thank you, Anna, because there we go, I just found it, thanks. And so they are still open, they haven't been closed out, and so we have a fee that we have to pay to DEP. And as I was saying, some years they haven't charged us, or they charged us for one park but not the others. And they've been more in this past, or in the fiscal year that's wrapping up. They did a better job of issuing their fees, and so this is what we're paying. So as the parks projects get completed, like Mansell and Palmer Cove, those fees will go away because the environmental condition will be remedied and will be closed out. Gagne Park is one that is being worked on now. Like, it's not an active park project, but the closing out is still in process. Furlong is another one that, that project has been done for a long time, but the closeout work, we're trying to get a scope put together of that because some of these they're small, it's just like a paperwork thing, but others may require more work that we would need to come in and ask for money to do. So we're trying to get that mapped out for Furlong as well.
Okay, thanks. And just a note on Furlong, I mean, you're probably not going to remember this because there's a lot going on, but there's still the parking lot portion that still needs to be remediated, so it's not quite closed out yet. So I was wondering but this sounds like money that we appropriated last year that's still closing out.
Right, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I totally missed that.
Councilor Marcelo.
Thank you, Chair. I actually circled the same thing. How long does it usually take to close these things out? And is the price that we're paying on the size of the park, or the amount of original contamination how do they do that?
I don't recall how the fee structure is done. I don't know that. I can find out and let you know. Excuse me. And, for Furlong, it's something that, the park project was done many years ago. And so, there's sort of a gap. The LSP that worked on that is not an LSP that we have a contract with. And, so that's an outlier, I'd say. I think things like Mansell and Palmer, I mean, those are actively being worked on, and those will be wrapped up when those projects are done.
So for Mansell, for instance, the money here is for what then? Because it's not the money that we're putting towards the
This is
remediation or
we're
whatever.
paying DEP a fine. It's a fine
It's a fine.
because the project is not closed out.
Okay.
And so although we're working towards getting it done, we still have to pay the fine.
And we'll be paying that fine until the closeout paperwork is completed.
Right. So this one should not be in the budget next year.
Okay. And so like Gagne Park, which also was remediated several years ago, we weren't paying any fine on that, if I recall.
We were supposed to have been paying it, but we hadn't been charged.
We hadn't been.
So.
Right. So, okay. And so now we're just trying to close all that stuff out.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to follow up on that just a little bit. It's really just a small technical question. Do these fines that we're paying, you noted that some of them weren't always charged and now they're starting to do a better job. Are we being charged back fines? Do these represent current bills, or are these corrections that we are going to see go forward?
Yeah, no, it's the current year. There's no back charges.
That was my question. Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, this is, I think, a comment I make every year, but since we have the newly elected mayor here, I do think a lot goes into planning. A lot of everything seems to fall on planning's desk, and you guys do a great job with what you have there. We have so many things that we could work on that we don't need to talk about tonight, but around things like single room occupancy and parking minimums and a zoning overhaul. We wouldn't want to overburden planning by dumping all of that onto them at once, and nor could we. We also have things like Salem 400 coming up. We've got a heritage line that's trying to get off the ground. We have, Old Town Hall. We've got Artist Road that needs work. It seems that there should be a more central authority that's not necessarily just planning that's handling all of this. It seems we should have a director of cultural affairs to deal with things like tourism, public art, and history and heritage. So I think that's my plug for that. I would love to see something like that at some point, because planning has too much going on that's important around housing initiatives and so the development that's happening and making sure that we have thoughtful development. That jamming the rest of that into there sometimes feels like too much. Don't have to comment on that. It's just a comment that I'm hoping we can address in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Following on Councilor Hapworth's comment, can you speak to how you are prioritizing what you need to accomplish in this upcoming budget cycle? A lot of the cost in here is personnel, but how are you establishing sort of priorities going forward? And can you also speak to how you collaborate with the departments who sort of have the boots on the ground responsibilities for a lot of these, right? Like you're doing a lot of planning for open spaces, but obviously Park and Recreation, as you noted earlier, has real responsibilities for some of these lanes too. So how do those costs get broken out, and what are you actually going to be focusing on, and how is that reflected?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's core work, as I was saying, that's supporting boards and commissions, and that work is that's a given, and it, depending on the board or commission and the time of year, that work, ebbs and flows, or some of them are pretty constant. In terms of projects, or I will say programs, those are things that we just administer. I think the flex is on, if we're developing policies or doing a planning study or managing a project. And most of the things that we're involved in today, that we're doing today, and that we'll be continuing, in the next fiscal year, are things that are already in process. And so that's, we're going to be coming to Committee of the Whole on the flood resiliency and climate resiliency overlay districts. So that's like the policy work that we're managing and looking to complete that. The open space and rec plan is something that will be wrapping up, and that's going to then free up some staff capacity. So it's, I think, we are working in some areas, like on the housing agenda, we have the housing roadmap that informs that work. We have our preservation plan that informs what we're doing there, where we're looking to secure funding for next steps. We have the Mac Park Survey and Planning Grant underway now. There's the capital plan that we've put forward where, we're managing projects and elements on there. There's work that, and some of that is challenging. So for instance, Old Town Hall, we've done a lot of work. We know what we need to do there, but it's an $11 million budget that we don't have. And so it's figuring out what are we going to be doing on the interim there. I will say, so Old Town Hall and Artist Row are a little different from just about everything else, in that those are facilities that we're managing and programming and maintaining. I think when there's a facilities director back on board, that will be helpful. We work closely with Public Works in managing those assets. In terms of collaboration, we work very closely with engineering, with Parks and Rec, with sustainability. So in our park project, there are some park projects that planning staff are managing. We've secured the grants, and we're seeing it through with Michael Crounce, who's in Park and Rec as the signature parks project manager, where there's been a transition of projects between him and us and what Jenna Ide was working on. And so we're very engaged with him as well, and looking at projects that we're managing that are receiving funding from Signature Parks as one of the pieces. I think in terms of climate and resiliency, it's looking, some of this is looking at grant cycles. All right, we know there's another grant coming up. What are we looking towards? So, Resilient Together, El Punto was one, then that led to, and this was sustainability managing with us helping out, but then that led to, the next round. And I think, the policy work, we also look to the direction of the administration in areas that are being set forth for focus. We have long-term, I'm rambling on here a bit, but, other things that require work over time are, like the South Salem Commuter Rail Station area. That's, we're working closely with the Salem Partnership on that. Beth Debsky's, the point on that with advancing it, we've applied for grants to give us some funding to look at, how we might plan for that area. Unfortunately, we got word last week we didn't get that grant, which was a bummer. But so we're going to go back and look, because we need to advance that ball. So is that answering it for you?
I think so. I think so. I will take a moment to thank our finance director for the good grant detail included in the personnel section this year. I remember that was a point of confusion for me in the past as we're trying to figure out what's actually funding positions, and it's much easier to tell now, so thank you for that. Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Not being a member of the committee, through you to Director Daniel. Thank you for touching on resiliency. I have a question. After looking through your departmental goals, overall long and short-term goals, why aren't we talking about a food action plan? So the only reason I really bring this up is when it comes to food systems and food justice, it really does intersect with urban policy and planning in a myriad of ways. Not only does someone need food for survival, but it also brings communities, cultures, and individuals together. So, and we also have a Massachusetts Food Action Plan. In the future, are we looking at not only when we look at utilization of open space, how we can put this in the purview of planning when it comes to a food action plan for Salem in general? Is that something that you guys are possibly willing to look into? Because I only bring this up because I do feel it's important, because you need to make sure that everyone is secure when it comes to food access. And I believe that is something under the responsibility, not only the health department, but the planning department as well.
Yeah, so that's not been something that we've contemplated. I think, we've worked with the health department with Carrie Murphy, in, for instance, looking at food deserts and opportunities for projects. So Daily Table that is coming to 135 Lafayette is something that I've been working on for 5.5 years, or close to 6, I guess. But that's not what you're asking for. But I think, where we've looked to is the health department and, through the CDBG program, providing funding support for some initiatives, support for, the Mac Park Food Farm. But it's been on I think, looking to health as the lead, and we've been, partnering and responding.
Awesome. If I may follow up. Yeah, it's, being one of the few that actually helped start Mac Park Food Farm, it was definitely a big struggle because it seemed like we were on our own when it came to dealing with one department and obviously the mayor's office when it came to this. But, just overall, it feels that when it comes to making this sustainable and a long-term goal, we really need planning to be heading this up. I hope that we've shown planning that when it comes to Mac Park Food Farm, how exciting and how many people have actually engaged with it. And I don't think it should stop there. I think we need to do more when it comes to our open spaces. So it's just an ask if, I just don't think it should be all in the health department. And being from the Massachusetts Food Policy Council Advisory Committee, these are the exact things we're talking about in the state. There's a disconnect between what state initiatives are, and literally most of the conversations stop with either a planning department or the administration in general. And we'd like to see that change because there is a lot of good work out there, but it seems like there's just a dead stop when it comes to either municipality or town. And I think as Salem being a leader, I think this is a good opportunity to show that when it comes to food policy, that it is on the forefront when it comes to the initiative of a planning department. Thank you.
Councilor Brzezinski.
Thank you, Chair McLean, being a member of the committee. Tom, just two things I'd like to touch on. First of all, probably most importantly, is I agree wholeheartedly with Councilor Stott on having an easy access to the project folders of the project itself. It's trying to find information on the city website when you're looking for where a project is at, where the maps are, at what stage it's in. You're, at least in my mind, I'm bouncing all over the place trying to navigate that, taking up a lot of time. It's difficulty navigating right now, and my suggestion would be that to make it easier for everybody, not only for the councils, but for the residents and for yourselves, is if each project had its own folder. And the person, if they wanted to say, for instance, gee, I wonder what's happening with this park, or I wonder what's happening with this building, each one would have a folder that would click on it, and right away, the first step would be, the parcel was purchased by so-and-so on this date, and this is the steps that have been taken forward since then. Some projects are at the very beginning, some projects are near completion. During that process, people could see where each project is at, like a thermometer, how far it's gone, which boards it's gone through, and when would be the projected time to break ground, when would be the projected time for completion. It's just more of an ease of getting the communication, because communication is the key to accomplishing any goal. And if everybody if there's an ease in communication, then things get done very quickly, and we don't get bogged down with a lot of questions. You don't get bogged down with the same questions, and people don't feel like they can't navigate this because they're not getting any answers just because of the difficulty. I think there's a big difficulty in trying to find out the information. You can find it, but boy, you're going to have to spend a lot of time. The other thing that probably bothers me personally and deeply the most is what we're building in this city isn't matching our city, where it seems that we're having this trend towards building boxes, building mundane buildings that look like Anywhere USA. I'll name names. The Hampton Inn does not, in my mind, in my opinion, does not fit in with any of the character of the city. I think it's a very ugly building. It looks like boxes upon boxes, and it doesn't at all say Salem whatsoever. The proposed box for Lee Ford Terrace, I agree with everything about Lee Ford Terrace except the design. It's just a box. I think that a lot of the people that live in that neighborhood look at it as just a box. If it was something that was a little bit more sightly, it would be a little bit more palatable, and we wouldn't be getting the backlash from those people. Bertini's. We saw the plans that the developers put out. It looks like a military barracks in my mind. It doesn't look, it's just 5 long rectangular buildings. Good layout, good design, good idea. Everything's a good idea. Just doesn't fit. We have a history over here. We have our own character. We're a seaside community. That doesn't match it. We're a historic community. We have McIntyre buildings, buildings going back to the 1600s. I've asked the architects to these projects, just give a little initiative, use your own artistic ability, and just present something that fits. That when people come to Salem, they look at the project and they say, "That's a nice building. That looks like Salem." It doesn't look like something I drove to in Denver or Jacksonville or somewhere else. Just Anywhere USA. I know that eventually falls on your plate, but it starts early in the process with the Design and Review Board, and I know that you folks oversee that. I've already spoken with the Design and Review Board. They've heard this from me, the same thing, and I just hope it sinks in that our projects in the future match the character of our city, not bring it somewhere, keep Salem, make it look nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are on page 673, General Administration, which is why our conversation was so wide-ranging. And I am looking for a motion. Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move to approve the personnel budget in the amount of $645,619, the expenditures budget in the amount of $91,155 for a grand total of $736,774.
Councilor Hapworth moves to recommend approval of the Planning General Administration personnel budget in the amount of $645,619, expenditures in the amount of $91,155 for a total of $736,774, seconded by Councilor Stott. All those in favor? 3 plus my own, that carries. We will move to the next section. Which is marketing and tourism in my book. We've had a couple of opportunities recently to meet on this subject in moments separate to this budget cycle. So hopefully everybody's got a good handle on how they're feeling, what they want to focus on. Any comments and questions from members of the committee?
Mr. Chair, could I just make one comment?
Absolutely.
On here, I just wanted to highlight under renovation and repairs, 5846. So we had submitted a request of $13,500. Not wanting $13,500, just wanting the regular $3,500. And as was noted here, that it's $10,000 for restroom attendants down at Artist Road during October. And so that actually has gone to DPS as we were hoping it would, so that there can be restroom attendants just incorporated as an expectation for October. We found we did that last year, and it had a huge impact in helping minimize inappropriate behavior and also just keeping the facilities, clean and operating. So I'm happy for DPS being willing to take this on, and thank you, Anna, for facilitating that.
Thank you for that note. Appreciate it. Councilor Stott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, that was the one item I circled for the bathrooms, because thank you for the bathrooms. Appreciate those were added last year. Definitely a plus to the downtown and to market and tourism as a whole, having that office down there. There were many notices last season, though, that they were closed due to service. So is that really enough? I mean, I was thinking you really wanted the 1,300, not just for, or 13,000, not just for staffing, but it's a lot of upkeep, I think, to keep those up. Or is there a plan for that? So that's kind of part one of my bathroom question. I have a part two of a potty question. Is there any longer term planning for additional areas like the one down at the Harbor Garage, like maybe hopefully one closer to the train station or central downtown area for public restrooms?
Yeah, so and just to be clear, this money is for the Artist Row maintenance. The ones at Destination Salem are managed by Destination Salem. And so this really is for the attendants to be working there. I think, I know there were some issues with the Destination Salem restrooms. Artist Row restrooms are new as well, just a few years old. There always seems to be something that happens with them. Unfortunately, they were damaged over the weekend, so we're working on repairing them. And so, but this really is just for staffing for the maintenance. With that, comes, refilling the toilet paper and those types of things. That's all that's in there. There's no plan for additional public restrooms that would be on a permanent basis that's in the works. So I know that it's an amazing amount of time I have spent talking about public restrooms with various folks over the years, and they're a tough nut to crack in any community because of there's the sort of self-enclosed ones that they self-clean when someone leaves there, but the maintenance and management of them is extremely difficult.
Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Destination Salem funding here, I believe, speaking with Kate Fox this morning, I believe that the 250 funds Destination Salem, but does not fund the work that's still going into the Heritage Line. Maybe 2 years ago or a year ago, Councilor Merkel and I were able to get $30,000 allocated to get the line up, to get the website funded, to get some signage. I think this is a worthy project. It's a project that certainly has a lot of work to go on it, but I think it's something that it is our only chance as a city to tell an inclusive story about Salem that's not just about witches and pirates. That's about the diverse people who have lived here and who have traveled through Salem and the impacts that they've made. So I'll just add that we do need to look at, we can't add money to the budget, of course, but we're going to need to look at ensuring that has funding over the next year so that we can kind of continue that work.
I will sort of follow up at a broad level on that, and maybe this is directed as much to you, Mr. Mayor, as to our planning director, but looking at the numbers included in this section of the budget, it just occurs to me, just, as as a layman would look at it, if somebody looked at this and said, what do we spend on marketing and tourism for the city of Salem, that how could this possibly represent the true cost to the city of what goes on here for those several months towards the end of the summer? I mean, it's, when you absent the fact that $250,000 of this expenditures number is just funding for Destination Salem, I think most of my constituents would say it must cost the city some amount of money just to host those people, right? And we must spend some amount of money to coordinate some of that activity. So I say that to, I think, pick up on some of the earlier points about how are we making it clear and digestible to people what the true cost to the city is of living with that ever-expanding sort of tourism season, and how do we make it clear to people what the true cost of needing to invest further in that is going to be, right? As that season continues to grow, how do we start to reflect that in our budget? Where does it live? How do we manage that growing need?
So I think it's a great question. Part of the challenge is that the costs borne by the city to manage the visitor economy is not borne by one department alone. Right? It's not a single program or a single department. It's spread across police, fire, licensing, public services, and this is a portion of it, but really only the portion that's directly related to primarily Destination Salem, though not exclusively that. I think that the conversation the council had earlier this year around the costs and benefits for October in the city is a good starting point for that, and one that we'll want to continue having, I think, in future years to really illustrate what the true benefit to the city is financially, not just the jobs and the tax revenues it creates, but the actual revenues from parking and so forth, and then also the true cost of the impacts and how we're managing those. It's something that has been casually tracked in the past, I think, by staff, but having that degree of public transparency is something that I think is beneficial for all, because it really does demonstrate that, to the extent that we can't stop the visitors from coming to Salem, but we can demonstrate to the people that live here what the benefits are of it, the direct benefits, and also the indirect benefits that it has for our economy, the jobs it creates, the restaurants and shops we get to enjoy year-round because they're supported by that kind of influx of visitors. And then also, like I've talked about with many of you before, I think understanding where we're getting close to the increase in costs to the city outpacing the increase to revenues, and opportunities for increasing those revenues by exporting those costs onto the visitors. And that's an ongoing project, but it's not, to your point, that's not reflected in any one single part of the budget.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I do want to say I don't ask that question to imply that it's not worth it. There's no conclusion implied. But I do think it's worth noting that's a narrative that's writing itself and has been for quite some time. And even as we want to shrink this book, that's a narrative that has to be somewhere for the city, right? Councilor Marcelo.
Thank you, Chair. The free trolley rides for Salem residents, do we have any data on that to know how many people have utilized that?
Do you know? I don't have.
We do have data. I'm happy to share it with. I'll send it after the meeting.
So is that how was that fee arrived at? Just the $7,000?
It's based on the historic amount of ridership. There's a MOU with the trolley. The city subsidizes at a steeply discounted rate each ride, and makes a payment. It's never actually the most I think the city has ever funded has been about $6,000 or $7,000, which is what's the maximum that's put in the budget. Obviously, during the start of the pandemic, it dropped significantly, but it's started to pick back up. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Stott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two follow-up questions to that, because that trolley line kills me every year. So we only actually pay what's used? Is that the MOU? Like up to $7,000?
Correct. We're invoiced each month by the trolley for per rider.
That makes me feel a little better. And just a general question that something popped up after I already talked. Why is public art in the tourism, market and tourism budget? Why is that not just like in our planning department budget with the public art planner? It's just kind of a...
Yeah, I've wondered that myself, actually.
Okay.
This is where it was originally, and
I think it might have some more, I don't know what the right word here is, legs?
Okay.
Insight, if it was not in this muddleness, which is another word that I'm having a hard time with, because there's a lot of, as we just discussed, muddleness, which, back to the meeting that we had in the winter about kind of a recap, a state of tourism in the city. I thought that was great with the revenue and expenses, and I really hope that it's something that continues every year I know that there are internal recaps within the city, kind of a state of how things went, but to be transparent with that, I know I really appreciated it this year, and I hope that happens going forward. And then along those lines, I think we should move public art. Public art's not for the tourists. I'm sorry, it's for the residents. They probably come here because it's great, but I think the residents enjoy it.
I think the origin goes back to because Artist Row, like way back, and I don't even know what it was called, long before I was here, but there was some connection between Artist Row and, tourism and culture, and I think that's sort of the origin of it being here. But the finance director thinks we can look at this next year, and I think it would make a lot of sense.
Okay, I think that seems to be all the question and comment, so I will take a motion. Councilor Appworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve the expenditures amount in the amount of $312,050.
Councilor Hapworth moves to recommend approval of the marketing and tourism expenditures budget in the amount of $312,050, seconded by Councilor Stott. All those in favor? 3 plus my own, that carries. We're getting deep into the section. We're getting there. Historic Commission. Well, is there anything you would like to share? Because I don't see any questions.
So, Patty Kelleher, our preservation planner, does a phenomenal job. And not just managing the historical commission, but also, with different projects that she's managing, like Almay's Clock or Dixon Chapel, or the broad, historic cemeteries, but also collaborating with others in the city when there's a city asset that's being looked at, or a park project for what the historic interpretation or aspects of it might be that need to be considered. And I think that makes us pretty unique to have that resource in-house. And it's something that I think, it took time, but I think people realize, like, oh, if we're talking about that old building over there, we need to talk to Patty. And current survey and planning grant is with the Mac Park neighborhood. Always looking to, again, this goes back to the preservation plan, to look at areas of the city that haven't been documented. And so that's what is currently on, in addition to projects that she's managing. And the preservation in a changing climate, I'm getting the name wrong, I always get the name wrong, which is fantastic. This is an annual conference that the Preservation Partners and Patty started, and it's grown each year, and the state's become interested in it as well, and so kudos to Patty for facilitating that.
Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair McLean, not being a member of the committee. And I don't know if this falls under historical or Concom. Do you have any idea where we're at specifically on Pioneer Village? I know there's been kind of some purgatory or limbo where we haven't been able to move forward.
Yeah, so that project is not managed by the planning department. So the historical commission has a role in it, in where there was a question about a citizen brought forward to the National Park Service that it be considered a historic asset, should be eligible for the National Register. And so the Historical Commission weighed in on that and responded. Patty is part of the team that is leading that project, but the Historical Commission is narrow. Yep.
I will say that last year when I was serving as liaison to the Historical Commission, they issued a new set of guidelines while I was associated with that board, which I thought were a huge improvement and are going to be extremely helpful to any applicant going forward who's trying to get through that process. And I would be very happy to see investments in that kind of update, for likewise city boards and commissions moving forward. I think the processes can often be complicated for a number of our boards, and updated guidelines help. So thank you for that. Seeing nothing further, I'll look for another motion. Councillor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move to approve the personnel budget in the amount of $35,273, the expenditures budget in the amount of $1,188, for a grand total of $36,461.
Councillor Hapworth moves to recommend approval of the Historic Commission personnel budget in the amount of $35,273, expenditures in the amount of $1,188, for a total of $36,461, seconded by Councillor Stott. All those in favor? 3 plus my own, that carries. That is the end of the operating section. Don't close your book so fast. Is there anything you want to talk about in the capital improvements?
Thanks, Anna. I'm happy to answer questions if folks have any. We're in here is the 5-year consolidated plan. So that's something that we need to do with, for our CDBG program. Every 5 years we need to do this consolidated plan. So that's what that's for. We won't actually be starting that until spring of next year, but we need the money in this budget so that we have it available for next year. Charlotte Fortin Memorial Project is something that we've been working with MAPC on. Julie Berry's been leading that, and this has been a multi-year project to actually come up with a physical memorial representation of Charlotte Fortin. So the call for artists for that is, I think maybe we went out today. So excited for that to be getting underway. Palmer Cove we've talked about. The On Point Center is actually a project we're not managing in the planning department, but the money is here. And then the ferry terminal building is something that has been envisioned for many years, and we're looking to actually advance it towards sort of the next step is design, conceptual design work, and then we'll be looking to pursue some additional grant funding from the federal government. We have a new project manager starting at the end of the month, picking up for Seth, so we're excited to welcome. His name's Daniel Collins. So this is one thing that he'll be working on with the harbor master and me as well. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, seeing none, there's nothing to approve here. We'll be doing CIP next week. Thank you so much for joining us and answering all of our questions, and I will look for one last motion. Councillor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn from Councillor Hapworth, seconded by Councillor Merkel. All those in favor? 3 plus my own. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.